Hey, Brian Goulet of the Goulet Pen Company, and I don't know that I've ever done a review of a Parker pen. I don't think that I have. Parker's a brand that we've been carrying for a number of years here at Goulet Pens, and we've always carried their ink. We tried carrying a couple of their pens, the Urban, the IM, the Sonnet. A couple of years ago, they did okay, but didn't do too great for us. We didn't have the time to devote to them, and they didn't really sell that well, so we dropped them. But we've always kind of been wondering to ourselves, is this something we could get back into? And we thought, why not test the waters a little bit? And we have this great pen here. It's a Parker Urban. It's a special edition in this Penman Blue, which is meant to come out to kind of commemorate the Parker Penman Sapphire ink that is kind of legendary. It's one of the most legendary inks that has ever been created. It's decades old. I have a bottle with a little bit of it in here. Really amazing ink. It's a very similar in color to Diamond Majestic Blue or Private Reserve Electric DC Blue, if you ever use those. It's got kind of this red, kind of purplish kind of sheen to it, and I think they really captured that pretty well in this pen. It's really kind of neat. So I just wanted to give you a rundown, tell you what the Urban is like, write with it a little bit, just show it to you, see if maybe you're interested in any Parkers, and maybe try and solicit some information from you Parker fans out there so that I can get better educated too. So I'm going to introduce the Parker Urban Special Edition to you today. Here's the box for the Parker Urban. Really pretty straightforward. This is, I believe, what pretty much all of the Parker boxes look like, at least of the lesser expensive pens. Kind of nice, for a box. I'm not one to use my pen boxes for any kind of storage or anything, but it's pretty solid. Feels well protected. It's got kind of this fabric-y feel to it, kind of nice. The box inside here, you pull the pen out. It's got this strap, but then it's held in by these little elastic bands. It's got a cartridge. The pen does not come with a converter. That is something that kind of surprised me a little bit, but wanted to let you know about that. And then it's got some instructions here, which are some of the most wordy instructions that I've ever seen. It's pretty epic. This is all just warranty information, of which this much is English. All the rest of it's in all these different languages and stuff. And then when you get to the part about the fountain pens, right there. So here's the part about the fountain pen. It's all pictorial, shows you how to do it. It does get the message across, and if you know what you're doing, it makes sense. But I would not want this to be my first introduction into learning how to use a fountain pen. So that's why I put out videos like this, to make it a little easier getting into it. Okay, so take the pen out, just kind of slides right out there. I will say first of all that I really like the shape of this pen. I find it very pleasant. It's a different shape than most other fountain pens. It's kind of got this scepter kind of look to it, which I kind of dig it. I found it kind of appealing even a number of years ago when we used to carry the Urban regularly. I've just always kind of been a fan of it. The cartridge here that it comes with, this is a blue, Parker Blue, and it's pretty big. It's a proprietary cartridge though. That's one kind of bummer about it, is that you can only use Parker's cartridges, and they have a very, very limited color selection. Now I do have a converter installed in here because I've been writing with the pen and stuff like that. It doesn't come with a converter, in case you missed that. The cartridge is really easy though. You just, when you don't have a converter in here, pull that out of there. Cartridge, all you gotta do is take the end here, that blue tip there, take it, shove it on there, it'll penetrate that, and then your thing's inked up and good to go. Really high ink capacity. So if you have an ink syringe and you wanna fill this thing with whatever other color ink you have, you got a pretty decent ink capacity. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's pretty good. It's gonna be bigger than most of your other cartridges or converters, for sure. But anyway, I've got the converter on here, the Parker converter. Now, it looks a lot like a standard international converter, but it's not. I've got a standard international one right here. So it looks kind of similar. It's filled with black ink. That's part of why it's so black, but it is kind of a smoky color, the converter is. But the opening itself, it might be a little tough to see, but the opening itself on the Parker one is a little bit wider. So if you try to stick a standard international converter on here, it is not going to fit. over the back of the feed. So you have to use the Parker one, which is kind of another little bummer there. Is it's, you know, that's part of the proprietary thing. But you know, Pilot's proprietary, Lami's proprietary, Platinum, most of the pens I've seen, it seems that I end up carrying all have proprietary cartridges and whatnot. But anyway, the pen can't be used as an eyedropper because it's all, you know, metal inside and everything. So stick with cartridges or converters there. It is an aluminum pen. So it's, you know, metallic. It's got a little bit of this kind of brushed feel to it, but it's very light as well. It's actually almost the same weight as a Lamy All-Star. It's 21 grams here. Lamy All-Star is 22. So it's going to be very similar weight, similar kind of length. If you're used to the weight of a Lamy All-Star, this is going to be really, really similar to that, which is kind of interesting. It's actually a little bit lighter. I've got this other Parker Urban that I got a couple of years ago, and this one feels a little bit heavier. So it's really interesting. Now, technically, this is the Urban Premier. I don't really know what makes it Premier other than it's a special edition maybe. I honestly can't really tell the difference between the two other than this has got gold trim. You know, it's got that brushed aluminum, which makes it a little bit lighter than whatever this is. And so, you know, other than that, I can't really tell the difference. But anyway, so you open the pen up and it's got this nib. It's kind of a semi-hooded nib. It's not fully hooded, but it's a little bit shorter nib than what you might expect from some other pens. And it actually really works to the advantage here because it's got this cap insert here that you can't really see, but it's in there. So it seals up really well. And because you don't have a huge amount of the nib and the feed sticking out of the pen, you can leave this pen kind of sitting out uncapped for longer than you can some other pens and pick it up and still write with it. I'll actually just kind of leave it sitting out for a little bit, but you can do that pretty darn well. So, some special things about this pen, you know, it's the limited thing, the color, the gold trim, that's really kind of what makes it special. One kind of bummer about it is it only comes in a medium nib. You know, I wish it came in more, but I don't mind the medium nib personally. I really don't, I don't have a preference for finer nibs, but I know that most people do. So the medium is kind of an all-around medium. I'll do a writing sample of that here in just a minute, but you know, as far as the rest of the pen goes, it is a snap cap. It is postable. It just pushes to post on there, and I really like the shape of it when it's like this too. Again, it's kind of that scepter tapered thing, so I really like it. And when you're holding it, it feels well balanced, whether it's capped or uncapped. It's going to be a little more front weighted without the cap, of course, because you're taking a lot of weight off the back when you unpost it. But it does feel really well balanced posted, which I really like. And the grip itself is a little bit slick. You know, it's a slick black grip, so if you have really slick and sweaty hands and stuff like that, you might have a little tougher time keeping this pen in place than some other ones. But the grip itself feels, you know, slick. So I think if I was writing with it for a really long period of time, I might need to take a break, kind of wipe my fingers off or something and kind of keep on going. Just something to keep into consideration there. But it is comfortable grip. And if you like to hold a little further back on the pen, it's not really a problem. You don't have any threads to deal with. There is this step here, but it's not a really harsh step. You know, like most snap caps, it's pretty comfortable even over that transition point from the grip to the body. So I really kind of like that about it. I want to show you a little bit up close here. So not a lot of fancy stuff going on the top there. It's got the classic Parker arrow here incorporated into the clip. The clip itself is pretty tight. You know, it's not the tightest one I've ever seen, but it's fairly tight. So just be aware of that if you're gonna wear it in your shirt pocket or whatever. I'm totally digging the blue color. Really, really love that. You know, it's got the little Parker logo here in the center band, very subtle. Nothing too glaring about the design of anything here. And then, of course, the back finial as well. No kind of fancy design or anything. It's just that plated gold. And then the grip here, you can see, is fairly plain. You can see that step a little bit better up close like this. And then the nib itself, I've got some ink on there, but it's got the Parker name and then just a couple little lines on there for ornamentation. And then the back itself, As Drew likes to call it here, it's got a good swoop on the feed. Drew's a big fan of the swoop on the feed. It's got fins in here, but most of the fins are actually going to be tucked away into the body of the pen, so that's part of why the nib stays really wet. And then this little guy here, that is part of what's going to snap it. That's actually what's going to hold the pen up onto the cap when you snap that thing in place. You know, and then if you want to post it here, you can totally do that. Looks really good. And since this pen was kind of designed after the classic Parker Penman Sapphire, which hasn't been made in several decades, it's really, really cool bottle. The ink color is just absolutely gorgeous. People will really pay a lot of money to get this ink because it hasn't been made in such a long time, and it's almost got legendary status. I did swap up this ink. Now, because of the ink itself is so old, there's a lot of debate about what the true color of this ink is, so I can't really say that. All I can say is the bottle that I have here and kind of what I've read about what other people have. But looking at that blue with kind of that sheen to it, now this pen doesn't have quite as red a sheen as what the ink that I have here is, but it does lean a little bit purple, a little bit red. As you can see, if I hold the Lamy All-Star up to it, the Lamy is kind of a pure blue, and then you can really see the blue that comes out in the Parker here. And there is actually another color of Special Edition Urban that was released at the same time as this pen. It's a yellow one. I didn't pick it up because I'm not personally crazy about yellow pens. If that is anything of interest, obviously leave me a comment or something like that, and I can look into that. But I love blue, which that's part of the reason I wanted this particular one. Now, if you're filling the Urban from a bottle of ink, it's really pretty straightforward. I already showed you how to do it with a cartridge. You just kind of push it into the back there. But if you're using a bottled ink, you're going to need to get a converter. And since this pen doesn't come with one, you'll have to buy it separately. You can see here now that I don't have ink in it that it's got kind of this smoky gray look to it, which is kind of distinctive to the Parker converters, and then the tip is black. You unscrew the body of the pen like so. It's always handy to have a little paper towel, which you can see here is obviously a little used. You take the converter and you push it on the back, and if you have the converter piston all the way down, see it's got a little red O-ring on there. If you push it all the way in, you'll know you've done it right when you can't see that red on the O-ring anymore. Okay, then you take your bottle of ink of choice, which I have Noodler's Black here just because I'm really familiar with it, and it's really consistent with a lot of different pens I've done. With the piston all the way down in the pen, what you want to do, I'm going to turn the bottle so you can see it a little better maybe. I've got the ink filled to about here. You want to dip this pen into the ink, at least until it goes up to the gold there. That way you're going to fill it. It's going to fill from back here, this little slot back here. If the camera will focus for me, come on now. But anyway, it's going to fill from right there. And so you need to make sure to get this all the way up here into the ink so that you're actually getting that filler hole up into the ink. Okay, so then you just twist the converter like so. Do it just kind of slowly, and you might have a little air pocket up top here, and that's fine. If you just slowly expel the ink back into the bottle, and then do it again, you'll eliminate most of that bubble, if not all of it. So now you got more or less a full filling. This tiny little bubble up there, but that's really not too much to worry about at this point. Okay, you just kind of wipe it on the tip of the bottle there. Try to keep your pen parts from rolling away. And then you just use your paper towel or napkin or whatever you want to use. I like paper towels because they maintain their integrity pretty good when they're wet, as opposed to a tissue or something like that. But you could use a towel, terry cloth towel or something like that if you prefer that. And of course I just dropped it, so now I got ink splattered places, but that's all right. And then because it's got this little ring right in here, that's where the pen is actually going to connect to the cap. The ink likes to get trapped in there. So I just kind of take my paper towel and kind of use my fingernail and push that up into there. You can use a Q-tip or something if you want to there. But you might get a little ink on your fingers. Personally, I don't sweat it. I wear it with pride. But it's totally up to you. Okay, so now the pen is all inked up. Just screw the back of the pen back on, connect the thing back, and you're all set to write. So once the pen is filled with ink, whether with cartridge or converter, shouldn't really matter too much in terms of how it flows or anything, but you are all set to write. I've got a Rhodia number 16 dot pad here. It's 80 gram white paper. It's kind of my preferred paper of choice. I'm really familiar with it. You can go ahead and write with it. Now, it only comes in a medium nib, so your nib options are kind of limited with the Urban, but that's all right. I'll go ahead and post it because I find this to be pretty comfortable posted. So I'll just write a couple of lines here. Oh, I always mess that up. Really smooth nib, I will say. I was not expecting the nib to be this smooth. You know, it's a steel nib, so it's nothing, you know, wild and crazy, but it writes really, really, really smooth. So I really like that about it. And it's fairly wet too. You know, if I'm laying down kind of a thick amount here, granted Noodler's Black is a pretty dark ink, but it's going to lay a pretty generous flow, which I think part of that is the fact that the nib is so far back up into that pen that it's not going to tend to dry out as quickly as other ones will. I do notice sometimes if I'm holding the pen in kind of an improper orientation that it will have a hard time starting, just like I had there. Like if I over-rotate it just a little bit, I can get a problem with it flowing, but then I rotate it back into the right position, it's good to go. So in that respect, you do have to kind of find, you know, the sweet spot, as people call it, for this pen. It's really just a matter of rotation. I don't think it matters as much kind of going up and down like this, but it is a matter of rotation. If I over-rotate it too much, you see there I start to get a flow problem. And if I go the other direction, it'll halt altogether. But if I'm making good contact with both tines down on the paper, I find this to be a very reliable writer. Now I want to give you a comparison here. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit for your sake. You know, I know a lot of people have Lamy pens, and I thought maybe comparing it to a Lamy medium would be pretty good. So I'll do just a little bit of a writing sample. You know, Parker Urban medium. Maybe do some figure eights here too. Okay, so that's the Parker Urban. I've got here a Lamy All-Star that I've also got inked up with Noodler's Black, and I just want to make sure that that's good to go. Okay. And then here I've got a Lamy I can hear audibly that the nib is giving more resistance than the Parker. So you can see there the Lamy started out a little bit wetter. As I kind of went along, wrote a little faster, it became a little less distinguishable. I had my Lamy sitting there for a minute, so it could have been that there was a little more ink kind of built up in the feed there. But I think in general, as I've been using the two pens, I don't find there's a huge difference between them. The Parker Urban might be a little bit finer than the Lamy medium, but it's really going to be kind of close, and that probably will depend on the ink that you're using as well and how it's going to flow. So I hope that's helpful in terms of how it writes. That is the Parker Urban. If you've got any questions about Parker or any other fountain pens, you can always hit me up on Twitter or Facebook. You can leave me a comment on YouTube or on Ink Nouveau. Thanks so much for spending time with me today, and write on.